Hello everyone. My name is Nandikesh Sivalingam. I work for a group called Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, CREA, basically. We look at research on both energy and environment as how it impacts our climate and environment. And we work in more than 30 countries, supporting groups who are doing advocacy and activism in their countries, trying to change their governments, their corporations, and various other policies to enable them with right kind of tools, research tools, to take forward their campaign. Today, I'm going to talk about the issues of thermal power plants in India and what kind of challenges the country is facing, and also go into some kind of macro level where do we need thermal power plants, if then to what extent, and then what is the future of this source of energy that we are looking at. To put it in perspective, in the moving world, what needs to happen, and therefore where are we as a country in terms of how action can be taken for us to see a better future for ourselves. To begin with, thermal power plants as such, how it operates is they burn coal at the power plant, and then coal heats up the steam runs the turbine, and then the turbine turns and produces energy. Almost 70% of the electricity that we all use right now comes from thermal power plants in the country. India would have around 150 thermal power plants. Our total electricity capacity is around 350 to 370,000 megawatts, out of which 210,000 will be coal, another 100,000 will be renewable energy, solar and wind, and then you have around 40 hydropower, and rest of them nuclear is 6, and then other smaller. And one source of the electricity is thermal power. So therefore, it's not start all or end all. So it's one of the sources. That's how much importance that we need to give in terms of how. But unfortunately for some other people, our country has been blessed with more than 200 billion tons of coal reserves. So that's how we are predominantly a coal-driven nation, because we have our own domestic reserves, which we burn and mine and burn to produce the thermal power that we need. So it has the issue of thermal power plant. You cannot separate it from coal mining and other things, but that's a topic for a separate day. I'll address from where it starts in terms of once the coal reaches the thermal power plants, it gets burned. And from there, what is happening, in terms of environment, in terms of social issues, where do we, and in terms of our own country's development, where are things, how things have happened so far, and what we, see as future. So, right from construction of a power plant, a thermal power plant would require, say, 1,000 hectares of land to build. And quite often, if you see India's in the landscape, we have thermal power plants in central India. There are mostly clusters right next to coal mines, and we have thermal power plants along the coastal areas, right? Starting from West Bengal all the way to Gujarat, you will see many coastal power plants spread in the coast. Many of these power plants, if you see, they are owned by state governments. So if you look at the coal power plant business, pretty much NTPC, it's an independent company, but NTPC owns almost 30% of the coal power plants in the country. And you have other central sector companies who own coal power plants. Then you have state sector companies, like the GenCos of each state will have their own. And those power plants mostly would have come in a coastal area, right, in that particular state. Then you have private sector power plant. That is around 50% of the country, and starting from Reliance to Adani. Adani is the biggest private sector player. And then you have JSW and others, because it's a very lucrative, at least it used to be a very lucrative business. Therefore, in the last 20 years, at least up to 2008, you see every, Tom, Dick and Harry wanted to build a power plant. Like people who are not even in the power business wanted to build a power plant. They are given land and coal mines to build power plants. So therefore, that is a different mess which will come to in some time, right? So you'll see power plants in central India and in the coastal. The other reason why you see then right next in the coast is these power plants also import coal. Even though we have 200 billion tons of coal reserves in the country, the coastal power plants also import coal from Indonesia, Australia, and other parts of the world, South Africa. These three countries are the main exporters to India. Now, that has its own challenges in terms of what happens to international markets, environmental and social issues in those countries, right? I think one of the most famous battle that's been happening is the Carmichael coal mine in Australia, how indigenous people in Australia are fighting that coal mine. That coal mine is owned by Adani, and then now they're trying to ship that coal from Australia to India, right? See, when it comes to development, that is a common language that is spoken among everybody, irrespective of color and all this thing, right? Because Just to give a side note example, like there was an article which came last Friday. It was an expose done by Greenpeace and other people across the world. So basically, the expose was that IPCC is going to release a scientific paper looking at impacts of climate change and the role of fossil fuels in that climate impact. You will see every government, major economies, right? Not the small island nations or small countries. All the major nations, including India, Australia, USA, everybody, the comments to that particular report was that you should not overemphasize the role of the fossil fuel and climate change. You should underplay the impacts. So that is what, including Saudis, most of them have said, don't tell the people the hard truth of, we will all be doomed if we don't phase out fossil fuels fast. So these are the people who are representing the people who are getting impacted. But end of the day, it's all business that matters to them, not necessarily the people they represent. So that is how governments operate. We might think that we vote, therefore they have our interests in mind, but quite often somebody else's interest that is that placed. Of course, on the climate front, there are all the geopolitics of who has to do more and who has to do less, who's responsible. But I think that's also comes into the picture in a great way that also hampers the progress of the climate conversation. But anyway, that's a different topic. But coming back to coal, we have coal mines in both in the coast and in the central part. So what happens for the coastal power plant is coal is mined in central India and transported all the way to different coastal states, and then coal is burnt in those locations and to produce the power. So coal that is burnt in the thermal power stations are called thermal coal, right? And then thermal coal has these are again carbon. These are different form of diamond, right? So the composition of this coal has not only carbon, which burns and then creates, it also has other impurity. It has sulfur content, it has nitrogen content, it has ash. Indian coal is notorious for its ash content. I think more than 30 to 50% of this coal that we burn has ash content only, which is a useless material. So therefore, to put it in perspective, India burns around close to 1 billion tons of coal in a year. And then out of that, if it is domestic coal, almost 30-40% is just waste material called ash. No, these are hard material, right? So what happens if you go to any thermal power plant in the country or in the world, you will see a huge ash pond right next to it. So what happens? Coal is burnt, and the ash, after it's burnt, ash is removed. It's removed from a slurry form in most occasions, mainly in slurry, mixed with water, and it is pumped into this land right next to it. This will be like huge fields of ash that is dumped. That particular concentrate would have other heavy metals, arsenic to mercury is a major issue. Like Indian coal has a lot of mercury. So any heavy metal that you name, it will be there in that concentrated ash, and it will be lying in the open ground. If you don't, like India does not have a proper standards for how to build these ash ponds. In many other countries, you have to line, they call it lining. You have to give a membrane kind of a material between the soil and the ash that's going to be dumped, because that will act as a barrier for the ash to leach into the ground. Because the moment this heavy metal leach into the ground, it will go into the like our groundwater, and we'll end up consuming that water with all the toxic heavy metals. But India till today does not have a standards on how those dams should be built. So all our dams are built most of the time right on top of the soil, and then the leaching, whenever it rains or whenever that water evaporates, the heavy metal leaches into the soil and then goes into our food and goes into our water. That's how all the ash ponds that operates. Till today, we don't have a standard on how they should be maintained and built. That's main issue number one, which rarely being discussed. It's a huge mess for definitely for local people. These are huge dam kind of structure. These are not imagine years of producing ash and dumping in the like right next to the power plant creates a huge structure, and these are not maintained well. Whenever it rains, they break and they flood into the agricultural fields. They damage houses. They quite often kill cattle and also people. 2019 onwards, there have been more of almost 5 or 6 accidents. We can't call them accidents because these are deliberate mismanagement, right? Mainly in Singrauli, like one of Sasan power plants dumped ash right next to the ash pond. That area got flooded. It's a low-lying area, and it destroyed agricultural fields and also killed a person. Similarly, NTPC power plant in Singrauli, it happened there. It happened in Jharkhand, Orissa. So in May, because these are power plants which have been operating for many years, and this ash keeps on piling up on over a period of years. And when there are heavy rains, they get damaged, and then this it's a quite a big challenge given that India's coal actually has 30 or more percentage of ash, right? So it's a legacy issue. It's been going on for decades. It's a mess. Like any coal community, local community, you go speak to them, ash is the biggest problem they would see. Thermal power plants, they heat water, and then that water becomes steam, and then that's how they produce electricity. In the industrial sector, thermal power plants are the biggest water consumers. What happens is there are rules for water consumptions also, but again, that is diluted, that is not followed. The other compounds I talked about in the coal is sulfur, nitrogen, and dust. So what happens when you burn them? This all becomes airborne gas. The sulfur becomes sulfur dioxide, nitrogen becomes nitrous oxide, NO2, NO4, all these things. And also the other dust becomes PM particle. So it's kind of a cocktail of many gases that comes out of the chimney of the power plant. In India, most of the power plants that are built, the power plant chimney height will be around 275 meters. That's the standard. And when this is released at that height, and whichever direction the wind blows, all those gases would be taken in that direction for hundreds of kilometers. Evidence to show that especially in the North Indian case where it acts as a ash shed. If you look at during winter time, starting from Pakistan to all the way to Bangladesh, it's the same ash shed. Wherever, because of the temperatures are lower during that time, and the air behaves in a very different way. So what happens is these gases then become particulate matter in a very short span of time, because these are volatile gases. They stick to particles and becomes particle PM 2.5 mainly, or even smaller particles, and then they keep on traveling in the air till they get deposited somewhere. Much of the pollution that comes out of the chimney of thermal power plant becomes a PM 2.5 or less. So PM 2.5 is known as one of the challenges of our generation, because World Health Organization limits PM 2.5 limits to around 10 microgram per meter cube in the air, right? But in India, if you look at during winter time, it goes to 300, 400 and all, like especially in North India. Luckily for us in the south, it's not that bad. We are still, but it's around 50, 60, 70, depending on where you live. It's still almost 10 times or 7 times higher than what they say is not a desirable limit. Like any amount of particulate in your lungs, in your body is still bad for you. But at least they specify some limit, because there could be background limits and there could be some unavoidable particulate formation. Our annual average is supposed to be around 40 for particulate matter, but none of the cities in the country or regions actually even come close to that 40. Right? It's all above 40 most of the time. In 2015, actually going before that. So for a long time, India had only standards for controlling dust emissions from the chimney. That is the particulate emissions. That was set around 150. Set limit was 150, and for longest time we had that as a limit. In 2015, the government of India came out with a notification, said that okay, now we have to control not only particulate emission, we have to control sulfur dioxide, we have to control nitrous oxide, we have to control mercury, and also water consumption for these power plants. I think it was actually thought out a reasonable notification that the government came out. But like every other environmental legislation, anything decent cannot stay. So from day one, we have records of RTI records from every major thermal power company in the country, including state-owned NTPC and others, trying to fight this law, saying that, oh, we can't adhere to this, we don't have this, we don't have land, we don't have that. Not a single power company said, okay, we have made so much money, we have been operating for 40 years, now we have used our atmosphere as a sewer so far, and we have made enough money. Now we should be definitely adhering to this standard. Not a single company said that. Everybody was saying or manipulating something or the other thing, saying that we can't do this, we can't do that, that become a problem. But for some reason, Ministry of Environment said, no, you have to still do it. Putting that in the context, India is one of the biggest economies in the world, and also one of the last economies to come up with standards. We look at US, the standards came 30 years back, the same standards. China, it came 10 years back. By the time we had the standards, China already implemented it and reduced the pollution emission from thermal power plant to a considerable amount. We are one of the last big economies to come with the standard, but still our power companies were, not willing. That is quite normal to any industries. Nobody wants new rules. Since then, it has been an uphill task till today in terms of how to control, get these power companies to adhere to the norms. Less than 1% have actually done anything about it. Less than 1% of the power plant. The rest of them, we had to go to Supreme Court and challenge the implementation. Supreme Court gave them very detailed deadlines and rules to implement. They did nothing. Again, it got extended from 15 to 17, 17 to 22, now 22 to 25. So we are at 25 deadline now, but still today, very remotely, the progress is happening. So since 2015, this notification has been either diluted or extended. Till today, there's only a handful of companies that have implemented it, and we don't see an end of sight for that. We know that the government's own arm of Central Electricity Authority, that's government's own think tank, proposing that they should be asking the implementation to shift to 2035 and then 2025. So one arm of government comes up with the law, which to protect public health and citizens. Another arm of government says no, it should not be implemented. It should be set to 2030. That's the status of governance that we are currently in. So it's very pathetic. How can we treat public health to an extent where that we just show abysmal respect to it? It's mind-boggling. On the other hand, those who actually make money, actually selling electricity and then using our atmosphere as sewers, are allowed to do whatever they want to do, right? Depending on how powerful they are. So that's what needs to be challenged. Everybody needs. It's not to say that we should not burn coal for electricity. Okay, coal is a bad thing, but still there are ways of doing it reasonably cleaner. Even that level of responsibility or respect, the power companies, most of them are state-owned, does not want to give. Is a very pathetic situation for the country. I think when you discuss hydropower dams or coal mining, you would have discussed about displacement as a major issue, where how till today there's not a single example in this country we can say, oh, this community was displaced in a decent way while adhering to all the laws. The same thing can be said in terms of how environmental laws are followed, public health laws are followed, even when it comes to Kamatapra. So that's the situation. Like if you go to Chennai, most of this ash is dumped into the sea or into the coastal areas. The coastal issues are even much different in terms of livelihood. Most of the fishing catch and everything, and also the higher temperature water is also let inside the sea, completely changing the sea ecosystem. And then the livelihood of fishermen who are living nearby. The primary issue that I've observed is we don't live in the West, right? We have a huge population. Our people who live on a paycheck to paycheck. It's very difficult for them to get mobilized on environmental issues or social issues and go demand certain things. And that is being used by the governments and the corporations for the advantage. For me as an ordinary person, I have to get up in the morning and go to my job, earn a livelihood, put food on my children, and my family's plate. That's my priority. Right? Where is the time for me to engage in larger issues of the country? That's being used as to manipulate people, and then that's the sad part of this thing. So even if I'm having awareness, what I can do in this thing is a very big challenge. I've not even touched upon the climate impacts of some of our lands yet, right? Because we are only talking about impacts to us Indians in India. Right? Current, like whether it is polluting our waters, polluting our air, polluting our land, the power plant does everything. Therefore, and then unfortunately, and we are not even regulating it in a decent manner to say that okay, we have done whatever we could do in terms of stopping it from polluting it, which is not the case in India. On top of that, it also emits carbon dioxide, which is a global issue in terms of climate change and in other challenges that the world is facing. Huge heavy monsoons, right in front of our eyes, right? What's happening in Kerala or in other parts. Climate change plays a major role in terms of large destructions also. Loss for states like Kerala in every year in terms of heavy rainfall and bad development is around tens and thousands of crores, like 10,000 crores, 20,000 crores, right? And that money is coming from our pockets only, not from somebody else's pocket. End of the day. So that's the cost that we are paying for climate issues and things like that. So that actually has triggered, after decades of conversation, a movement towards phasing out coal, like at least as soon as possible. So why as soon as possible is coal has at least enough substitutions. Like we can actually replace coal much faster and much cheaper, right, in the form of renewable energy, solar and wind primarily. So therefore, the global call is to phase out coal as soon as possible, and then moving for better sources of electricity, that is through solar and wind. Now, in the case of India, it's very cheap, right? It's almost 50% of what new coal would cost, right? If a new thermal power plant would cost you around 5 rupees per unit, renewable energy or solar would cost you less than almost close to 2 rupees now. So that's the cost thing. And then there's also other issues of other things of battery development, therefore storage, and other things will pick up, which would enable the renewable energy to be sold at a much cheaper rate. Therefore, the solutions are there, right? And the solutions can be scaled up. Therefore, the global call is towards phasing out coal. Now, coming to India, whether we are prepared to do it or not, I think India is in a very good position to start at least thinking about it and slowly moving towards it. Because we have built around 210 gigawatt of coal power plants. That is more than enough for us for the next 10, 15 years. Without building one more coal plant, we can manage our power requirement, by only doing, solar and wind and other cleaner sources and not worrying about coal. Because since 2010, there's a huge coal plant production. Everybody started building coal power plants, and now most of them are running at 50% or less efficiency. So by utilizing these power plants properly, we can actually maintain run our demand for next 10 years. Therefore, without displacing more people, without adding more trouble to the country, we can maintain our current power plant fleet, and and by properly implementing the solar and wind policies, and we can actually manage. So therefore, the advantage I know that we can decisively take a decision on, okay, we are not going to build coal power plants. Say we are going to peak our electricity or coal consumption by some amount in the next decade. And then from there, we're going to slowly come down. And then by that time, solar and wind would have got more matured, more cheaper, and there'll be more technology. And then we'll be able to replace all the unnecessary coal and fossil fuels through other cleaner sources. So that's the pathway I think India should now think about in terms of how we want to move forward. See, the difference between other coal burning Western countries and coal burning Asian countries is that they have sorted their domestic environmental issues very, very early. They are implementing the rules properly. Their domestic laws are very stronger, right? So their issue is only on climate, right? For us, public health benefits in India, less displacement in India, less water issues in India, and also the climate benefit that we are going to get. Right? So that's the added advantage, bonus advantage that we have in terms of considering this, in a more faster way than even other countries. So that's something that we should go for, is my opinion. The fundamental point is whether you take when you take a thermal power plant, whether it's air, water, land, right, and also the global climate, everything has its impacts because of a thermal power plant. So it is not something that we can say that, oh, we have right to develop, therefore we should burn more coal and then produce more electricity through coal. That's nowhere reasonable. If you look at the people who are living around the power plant, water consumption is a challenge. Water pollution is another bigger challenge due to thermal power plants, because the water that they let go has heavy metals and other things. It's indescribable pretty much in terms of the life around. Like people should actually go to Singrauli, Korba, and even some parts of Telangana where the coal mining is happening, right, in Ramagundam and other places. See how these communities actually live in terms of then make up our minds in terms of, should we say more yes to more coal, or should we just limit it and then move on to some other forms of electricity? After all, it's just a source of energy, right? It is not end all.